Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias.
Hello, and welcome to my channel now. Somebody else likes to say hello and welcome to my channel. I think we all know who that is, and that's William's Knife Life. He's been doing a lot of videos on Bowie knives, and I will eventually do one where I show off a bunch of my Bowie knives. But today I'm just going to be looking at one of them, and that is my D-Gurad Bowie by Rough Rider, and that's because William's Knife Life just showed his D-Gurad Bowie. Now, I did a video on this a while back and talked about the praises of the knife because it is a big, heavy knife, and there were questions asked about the brass strengtheners running along the back of the blade because it looks like they're just glued on there. They may be pinned through, I don't know. Kind of nice looking there. Might be pinned on, might be just glued on, I don't know. I have pounded into boxes and heavy plastic jugs and stuff, and those straps have remained in place. Notice it does not wrap over, it's just, which I think it should have. It should have been wrapped around and then pinned in place, but and you got the file work. This knife was made in Pakistan, kind of like the D-Gurad Bowie by William's Knife Life. His is the SCZO or SZCO, however you pronounce that name. Theirs was also made in Pakistan. I think it has a slightly smaller blade. This thing weighs a ton. Got a brass guard here, and like I said, I did a video on this a while back. I have since removed it because one of the problems I said was the knife was built rock solid, but after pounding on things a few times, the handle came loose. And so what I thought I would do is try and make this handle a little tighter, and that's what I'm going to be doing in this video here. I'm going to take this handle apart, and you're going to see exactly what the tang is like in this knife. Now, I've got another Rough Rider knife, which is the Mountain Man Bowie. I'm also working on that one. I will show you a picture of that one's tang also, but let's get this one opened up real quick. Okay, if you see there's this brass cap here, and that actually is a screw. I've taken this apart once so I can see what it looks like, but all I have to do is loosen it up with a large crescent wrench, and then I can actually take it apart with my hand, and we'll see what the screw looks like here. And there we have it, just a little screw, brass cap, and then you see the hole in the back here, and then you can take off the D-Gurad and the stag, and this is the full tang of this knife. It's basically more like a third of a tang, and then you've got the rat tail going here with the screw bits here so that you can get this in place. The problem is this is the hole they made for the handle, and it's so big that, well, you can see how it can roll around and rattle. And then you've got the brass D-Gurad, which basically sets like so. So the if this pin had gone all the way through and they used a regular nut, it would have been able to tighten up a whole lot better than had they used this. Also, it would have been much nicer if they would have run this tang, considering this tang is holding that whole blade. Not the strongest tang for such a big blade. This is a very heavy knife, and it's one of those little cost-saving things that they're doing, but they're saving money at the wrong place. They could have left off the brass there, and that would have been a better way to save some money on this and given a more proper tang for the stag handle. It would have been nice to have two slabs of stag and a proper tang and see a full tang on that knife. but that's not what they did. And to tell you the truth, I wouldn't be surprised if you were to take apart some old D-Gurad buoys and find a tang similar to this. Really, as long as what you're doing is chopping straight down, you're not going to probably break this, but it is kind of a shame that that's how much of a tang they put on there. You can see it right there. And like I mentioned, Rough Rider has been known for cheating on their full tangs. This is the full tang on the Mountain Man buoy I have here, and on this one you would have been able to see the metal going all the way around once you put on the handle. Of course, this one was wrapped in leather and everything else, but they also did the same thing with the Highland buoy. So I'll be talking more about this knife in another video as I'm rehandling this knife. But you can see what they did there. You have a very short actual tang for the blade, and then what they've done is they welded on the rest of the handle. And so this blade shape, if you see that blade shape, chances are even with other knife companies, you're going to think you have a full tang because you see the metal going all around. But is it a full tang? Is it not a full tang? I think it's kind of questionable. And if this welding breaks loose, then that blade could fall out. You see that it is just a bump there. Any case, let's see what I can do to fix this D-Gurad buoy. I think what I'm going to do is take some of this plumber's epoxy putty, which as you can see here says single stick, easy mix, makes repairs fast, stops leaks, hardens like steel, blah blah blah, in 20 minutes. So what I've got is a chunk of the putty, and what you do is all you do is squeeze this together over and over. They claim you should use gloves. I'm going to wash my hands right after I do all this, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of it in the handle, because the idea is it's got to get pushed through that hole there. And I'll probably put a little bit on the tang itself also, and then just kind of jam it all in there, and hopefully it will hold it in place. And then what I've got to do is, once I've got it in place, I will get the handles as straight as I can, screw it back together, and then let it sit for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and see if the handle is strong or not, if it doesn't move. Because no matter what, I'm not going to be able to repair or change that part of the knife. But what I want to do is make it so that when this stag handle is in place, at least the handle doesn't wobble, because then at least it'll be a little safer to hack with things with it. And like I said, I was actually hacking things with it pretty good, and it wasn't breaking or anything. It was just the handle came loose. It's an interesting fact that when I talked to a person at a former person at SMKW, someone who used to work there, they kind of laughed it off and said, yeah, well, the Damascus knives, they're really more for show. You really shouldn't be doing stuff like that with it. And it's like, seriously? You make a big ass D-Gurad buoy and you're expecting people not to go and pound stuff with it? Why wouldn't you? Where's the fun in just looking at it? You want to be able to actually hit stuff with it. And so I was a little upset when I heard that. Anyway, let me jam all this in place, and we'll see how it's going to look. Okay, it took a little bit of effort, and basically what I had to do is I had to pack this completely filled with the putty and then jam it through, and then I had to clean it out a bit and everything else. And I finally got it so that after about 4 tries, I finally got it so this handle will not move at all, because there's really no way for the handle to move. But in the process of doing that, if you can tell here, the alignment is off here. So the stag is sticking out a little bit more over here, and it's recessed on this side. So thumb catches there, or finger catches there, and finger catches in this direction here. And as you can tell, the pommel is not lined up at all. The stag is high here, and then the screw cap is high also, but the D-Gurad is low. I've tried pushing it up, but I can't because of the angle of it. That might have happened when I dropped it also. I dropped the D-Gurad, so I might have got bent a bit. So what I'm going to have to do is grind this down here and kind of match it all up. And then I'll probably torch it a little bit more too. And I might actually sand this down and torch it too. But the important thing is, as I scrape off some more of the putty here, it hasn't completely dried yet, but there's nowhere for this handle to go now. It is tight as can be. And I'll feel a lot more comfortable whacking into something with it. But the important thing is I know which kind of tang it has in there. Basically, the tang actually goes about that far in, and it's only about a 1/2 inch wide, and after that it's just a screw. So I kind of know how much tang is in there and how much brute force I should be able to use on this knife. It is definitely a big, heavy knife, and it looks a whole lot better now. But I think now I will feel okay, hitting a watermelon with it or something like that. I definitely would not try and cut down a tree with it, which is something that Confederate soldiers would have been doing with it. They would have been cutting down trees and all sorts of stuff. And who knows, maybe that tang is good enough to actually cut down a tree, but I'm not going to try it. First of all, I'd rather just use a saw. But yeah, it feels good. You got that gap right there, got the good D-Gurad, and it's a much better representation now that the handle doesn't wobble. Okay, now before I wrap all this up, I want to go over a little bit about this knife from the original video that I did, because I actually talked a little bit about the history of this pattern of knife, because yes, they call it a D-Gurad Bowie, but this knife looks nothing like the knife that Jim Bowie used on the sandbar fight. Most historians agree that the knife that he used looked more like this, which is basically just a large carving knife or a large butcher knife. This particular one is from the Ontario Knife Company, but this is really more what his Bowie knife looked like. There are people who actually make examples of it. The difference is the blade would be a little bit thicker, the handle would be a little bit larger, but this is really the kind of knife that Jim Bowie used. Notice there was no real guard, it was just the blade itself. Your hand went at the back of the blade, and then there was a little bit of grip there. But that's the knife that Jim Bowie actually carried, and that's really what the Bowie knives looked like for Jim Bowie. Now, the most common Bowie knives we see today are really more of a Sheffield style Bowie knife, and these were made during the Civil War, and for both sides of the war, the Confederates and the Union both bought, or the Federal troops, whichever way you want to call them, they bought Bowie knives from Sheffield, England. And but the D-Gurad Bowies, such as this, these were made in the South, and no two really were exactly alike. But that's the where the D-Gurad Bowie comes out of. It was a Confederate style, and it really looks more like what the old Boucans used in the Caribbean. Now, for those who don't know, what the Boucans were, is they were people who deserted ships back in the early settlement of the Caribbean, and these were both Spanish, French, even English people who would desert their ships, jump ship and then just go run off into the wilds of the islands, and they would hunt wild pigs and then smoke the pig meat, and that's what boucan actually meant. It was a French word. It turns into buccaneers. So the buccaneers would take their cutlasses, which were too big for what they were doing, because they were chasing down pigs, and they would just cut down their cutlass and turn it into a large knife so that they could butcher the pigs and stuff when they catch them, and they would actually run them down and kill them with a knife. So pretty dangerous work, but that's really more the design of a D-Gurad Bowie, and actually that is, if anything, that's really where the true design of the Bowie knife came from. The reason they're called Bowie knives is because of Jim Bowie and his knife. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't care if you call it a Bowie knife or a Bowie knife. I have a feeling that the folks in England also didn't care. They might have been making it and calling it a Bowie knife. And if you did not know how to pronounce Jim Bowie's name, you would have probably read it and said, oh, it's a Bowie knife, even way back in the Civil War times. But the South made the D-Gurad Bowies, and they were actually made in the South. These were not something that was a product of Sheffield, England, and various blacksmiths made them for soldiers. And the reason they needed a big knife is because, well, the rifle shot once. Yeah, the pistol would shoot about 6 times, but nothing like a big intimidating knife. So that's the history of the D-Gurad Bowie, and I mentioned this in the original video, but that's gone now. Now let's talk about this particular Rough Rider knife itself. Well, you already saw what I had to do to repair the handle here, and that was basically because I was pounding on stuff and the handle got loose. The problem though is none of this was glued together, it was just screwed together. And that is probably a problem with the knife. So if I were to buy it new again, the first thing I would do is probably take it apart and then fill the handle with a gap filling epoxy like a Gorilla Glue or something, and then glue it all back together instead of what I just did now, because as you can tell it's a little crooked. And then I would have tried to get it a little straighter to begin with. As I mentioned, I think these things, the brass lines here, the brass bars might be pinned onto there, but I really don't know. I hope they are. What I would do if they were to fall off is, well, I couldn't do it, but others, what I would suggest doing is drilling holes through there and pinning it on, or just knocking them off and sanding it off, or you know, cleaning it up a bit. The problem with the biggest problem with the knife is the tang, and the fact that it is not a full tang knife. If it was a full tang knife, I'd be much more inclined to use it, you know, use it forcefully and stuff. But as it is, well, you can see the Damascus pattern on it is really well done. I really do like it. You have a nice swedge up here. This is unsharpened, it's just a swedge. And you've got a convex grind going on with the blade. So it's really a heavy, stiff blade. It's and I can't fault the knife for the blade, I can for the tang. But that is critical. The tang could have been a little bit better. The other problem I have with it is you have this leather sheath. It's got the RR stamped in there, if you can see that. See there, RR. This same knife was also made by Colt before it was made by Rough Rider. You got the belt loop right there. It's a very wide belt loop, so you can fit it on just about anything. But what I have a problem with is that it is a Pakistan-made leather sheath, and like so many of them, if you notice here, the brass around there is getting all sorts of corrosion around it, and I don't know what it is. I think it reacts with the tanning that they use, the tanning method that they use with the leather, and that is going to lead right into the sheath here too. So you definitely cannot store the knife in this sheath, because if you do, you're going to get a rust stain right around here, and it's going to be very bad, because this is a carbon steel blade. So that is something you have to be very careful with this sheath. I really do not like the Pakistan leather sheaths. The whatever they use to tan it with or whatever really causes a lot of corrosion, and it causes seepage, like oil or something seeping out of this stuff. Can you see that? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But that's really a big issue with the sheath as far as I'm concerned, that it just oozes crap, and if you're not careful, it can damage your knife. So you got to be very careful with that. But if you're into reenacting or something and you're playing a Southerner or a Confederate soldier and doing some reenacting or something, I think this would be an ideal piece for that kind of work. Just be wary of the leather sheath and just be kind of proud of how big and heavy this is, and just be aware that it's got a funky tang running through here, so it's not going to be the strongest of knives, but as something like a wall hanger or just something to hang off the side of your horse or something like that, or just a brandish around the campfire, yeah, it's going to be good. And yeah, and you could definitely stab something with it, and you could definitely chop up a watermelon with it. So there's my 2 cents on the knife. Now that I fixed the handle, I'm much happier with it. I will throw in a little bit of a slideshow at the end, so you can see some snapshots of what I'm talking about with that, with the sheath. Also get the dimensions out on this thing and everything else. But in any case, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed the look at how I had to fix it. Would you believe it? I've got some more video content. I actually managed to grind down the pommel before I finished editing this, so let's take a look. So, as you can tell, I basically just clamped the D-Gurad Bowie to my workbench, and I'm going to use a drill and a grinding stone and kind of freehand grind all this down so that it all matches up. We'll see how it goes, and if it works well, then maybe I'll go ahead and work on the front up here too. I don't know about the front. The front doesn't bother me as much as the back does, because the back is somewhat unsightly. The front, it's just a little misaligned. It's not the end of the world. Any case, I'll show you some photos afterwards, or the end results, and hope for the best. Okay, I will be the first to say it's not perfect. I mean, you can see some grind marks there. I can probably polish that out. But it is smooth now, and it's smooth over here. And while it isn't far from perfect, well,
it wasn't perfect to begin with. Remember, the handle was all loose. And at least now it's more functional because the handle is not loose anymore. I'm going to need to either probably get some brown varnish and either varnish this, which is what I think they did, or I can try and torch it, but I got a feeling that was just varnish on there. We'll see how that works. I'm not too concerned about that. What I'm happy about is that I ground it down pretty well and it's matched up pretty well. Nothing sharp. Yeah, you can see some definite grind marks in there and everything else, but I can probably polish that out over time. I'm not in too big of a hurry, and my handle is nice and tight. So it's light years above where it was with a loose handle, and while that's obviously crooked, I could also grind this down even more and kind of smooth it out and get it to match on both sides. But as you can see here, well, maybe you can or you can't, the handle itself is still crooked, so I would be grinding away a lot of metal there. I'm happy with the way it is right now. Ain't perfect, but it wasn't perfect to begin with. Any case, there's the end of it, my D-Gurad Bowie. Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with the Bias. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.